I want to try and include those.
Hi everyone, this is Leslie Likens with CXPA. Happy Customer Experience Day. We are so excited to be able to bring you this webinar today. And we've got a number of online events and opportunities that you can be a part of throughout the day today. Just be sure and check out the website at www.cxday.org. If you're following along on social media today, we are using hashtag CXDay. And we definitely encourage you to tweet and share about your thoughts on today's webinar. We'll also take questions as well, so you should have a questions box there in your GoToWebinar panel, and you can feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and I'll bring those to Julie as soon as she wraps up her formal presentation at the end. So again, if you haven't already made it over to our cxday.org website, I encourage you to check it out. We have over 20 events that are happening in cities around the world. We actually began our celebration yesterday in Australia, and we have been moving around the world through Europe and into North America and Latin America. So we'll continue to have online panel discussions in addition to this keynote webinar. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our special guest for today. Wittes Schlack is the Senior Vice President of Innovation. She's one of the founding members of C-Space, and Julie has been instrumental in designing and continually evolving C-Space's offerings. By day, she leads a product innovation team whose mission is to develop and test new techniques and technologies for consumer collaboration. And by night, she is an essayist and published author of fiction and narrative nonfiction. And 24 hours a day, she's a devoted fan of storytelling and meaning-making in all of its myriad forms. Julie, you absolutely sound like a very busy person who has fun doing that. So, I think that storytelling is so critical, and I love to hear from others who take that and go with it. So, Julie, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin your presentation on the self-examined life.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Leslie. I'm really happy to be here. And, it's lunchtime in Boston, so it's story time. And I actually thought I would start with a couple of stories that illustrate the power of ethnography. So what is ethnography? It's essentially very close, long-term observation in people's natural environment. And there's a great bit of ethnographic folklore that dates back to the 1920s. And many of these sort of great stories of corporate ethnography feature the same guy as their protagonist. It was an engineer at 3M, a guy named Richard Drew. In the 1920s, Drew, if it's possible to mute things at CX, that would be helpful. So in the 1920s, Richard Drew spent several days at an auto assembly plant observing how the workers were using his company's sandpaper, which is the business 3M started out in. And at the time, two-tone cars were all the rage. And Drew kind of serendipitously noticed that the plant workers were very laboriously and very unsuccessfully, actually, trying to use newspapers to shield the painted portion of the car while the second color was applied. So just through that close observation, he was alerted to an unmet need that ignited the idea for what became 3M's keystone product, which is masking tape. So that's one example. Leslie, if it's possible to mute things at your end.
Yeah, let me see if I can figure out where the background noise is coming from. We're having a little bit of trouble. If everybody else can go ahead and mute themselves, that would help us out. We're going to go ahead and try to do it from our end as well.
Great, thank you. Meanwhile, let me carry on with a more contemporary that illustrates the power of ethnography as well. Not just to understand and improve customer experience, which this story does, but also to drive organizational initiatives and really ultimately affect cultural change within a company. So I'm about to show you several still images from a mini documentary that we at C-Space made for one of our clients about the life and trials and needs of rural shoppers in general. So the lead in this documentary is a woman named Vicki. We got to know her through our work with her and about 300 shoppers of this retailer in a private online community. So we're going to start with Vicki and her daughter outside their home in Iowa. So this is a general store in Vicki's town of Belle Plaine. It's perfectly a fine place for picking up a gallon of milk when you run out, but it's far too costly, and it has far too small a selection to meet the recurring kind of ongoing needs of Vicki's family. So now, although Vicki doesn't consider herself a coupon fanatic, she certainly is a frugal shopper with a far more organized collection of coupons than certainly I've ever had. For me, as an urban dweller, a shopping expedition means walking up to the grocery store a few blocks away. Or if I've got a lot to buy, it means driving to the Whole Foods a mile away. But Vicki's circumstances are quite different, and this is sort of one of the points I'll come back to a lot, which is we are not necessarily our consumers. So Vicki's circumstances are very different. For her, once every couple of weeks, she fills up her car with gas to take the very lengthy trip to one of our clients' large retail stores. And I say once every couple of weeks quite intentionally because the timing of these trips is somewhat dependent on the price of gas on any given day. And the duration of the trip is also dependent on the timing and the length of the trains that barrel down the tracks that span the one rural highway, the one rural route from Vicki's home to the store. Now, Vicki's daughter's mobility is somewhat impaired, so when she does finally get to the store, it's hugely helpful for her to be able to get a handicapped park space. And because getting to the store is such a production, it's crucial that she be able to check off all of the items on her list. So when an item is out of stock, especially an item that they've promoted via a coupon, Vicki feels not just inconvenience, but what she actually feels is betrayed. And so to use her words, she kind of described this experience as it's just plain rude, right? I mean, it's something she experiences very personally. After all, she's prepared for the trip. She's invested hours in making it, enough hours, in fact, that she needs to bring a cooler with her so that the perishables will survive the trip home. So why have I told you this story? We did this live ethnographic work and produced this documentary to help our client understand the specific needs of the rural consumer and the customer experience of the rural consumer. The effect of it was to bring to life the importance of an issue that they'd actually known about for years, that they knew was an issue, that being problems with inventory management. But what's interesting is that this one photo film helped people kind of internalize the problem, help people at this retailer feel a sense of urgency around it in a way that just reams of pure data hadn't. So as importantly, it created empathy and a sense of personal accountability to Vicki and the millions of shoppers like her that just hadn't been there before. Suddenly people in the organization were saying, well, what about Vicki? What's Vicki going to think? So I hope I've made the case for the value of traditional in-person, on-site ethnographic work performed by specialists as a means of better understanding and improving the customer experience. But unfortunately, there are some challenges associated with this approach. The first is the observer effect. So unless ethnographers are willing to spend weeks on end with their subjects, their presence inevitably introduces some behavioral change in the people they're observing. After all, if you're a teenage girl, for example, are you likely to buy condoms for your boyfriend with an ethnographer tailing you around? Or if you're her mother, might you hold back from purchasing those Cheetos or Oreos? Or maybe hesitate to strip off your bra the moment you get home from work? Or if you're her father, will you be tempted to tune into Nova instead of the latest episode of Hoarders or that trucker show? So the observer effect is one challenge. Cost and scalability are two other really big challenges. Traditional ethnography takes a lot of time, not just for travel and observation, but to then weave a story out of the hundreds of moments being captured. The day rate for skilled ethnographers isn't cheap, and understandably so, so these costs add up. And while I believe that we should never underestimate the power of the sample of one when trying to understand the nuances, the range of customer experience, I can appreciate that you often need larger sample sizes than that. Now, what's interesting is that at the same time, technologies like mobile ethnography apps and selfie sticks and Fitbits and wearable video cameras are making people comfortable monitoring their own calorie consumption, their sleep patterns, their heart rate, their friends, their family, all of their daily experiences. And this is leading some companies to investigate whether they can obtain comparable or at least good enough ethnographic insights in faster, cheaper, and more scalable ways by using simple mobile ethnography apps that equip people to observe themselves. Now at T-Space, we built our own mobile ethnography app and integrated it into our community platform, but there are dozens of other great standalone mobile ethnography tools out there. All are structured pretty similarly, inviting people to chronicle their experience via some combination of text, images, video, and/or audio. Now, a bedrock principle is that the ethnographer functions as both participant and observer in chronicle ethnography. The ethnographer joins in with the people and processes she sees unfolding, while also maintaining enough distance to see them with fresh eyes. So this kind of begs the question, can consumers really be their own ethnographers? Is this real ethnography, or is it more kind of just self-documenting? Real professional ethnographers would say the latter. They'd argue that there's more to ethnography than knowing how to use camera and notebook, that it's a discipline that requires both training and intuition. And frankly, I don't disagree. I think app-enabled self-ethnography probably isn't as rich and certainly isn't as objective as having a professional ethnographer out in the field. But the question is it good enough? And might it in fact offer some advantages over traditional methods? I think the answer is yes. But let me take a few minutes to really dig into some of the most common questions, challenges, and benefits associated with self-ethnography in general, and particularly in the context of understanding and enhancing customer experience. The first challenge, and I suspect the most daunting one, is this. In being your own ethnographer, say that 3 times fast, in being your own ethnographer, when you're engaged in the moment, it's very difficult to remember to step out of the moment and capture it. Or at least it used to be. The fact is that these days, Gen Z people and millennials and even boomers like me now routinely do that anyhow. It's almost as if you don't take the photo, it didn't really happen. So chronicling life experience is no longer some anomaly or some aberration. It's actually increasingly central to people's experience and standard operating procedures as they go through their day. Still, what triggers people to chronicle those key moments? Well, we found a lot of success in designing diary and ethnographic activities that are triggered by an emotion or a sensory experience. So here's one example. We were working with a major health and beauty care company that wanted to develop a new subline of antiperspirants. So they were interested in exploring scent. What's the role of scent in people's lives? What are the moments that they notice the scents and aromas around them? What are the scents and aromas that make them feel great? So we asked people over the course of a week who were equipped with a mobile ethnography app to just, over the course of the week, capture a picture or a video or make an audio note anytime they smelled something that made them feel good. And what we got out of this, of course, were pictures of Play-Doh and freshly painted birdhouses and newly mown grass. We got all kinds of scents that took us well out of this sort of traditional repertoire of antiperspirant scents. More importantly, though, these pictures and stories revealed the power of scent to very fleetingly elicit other times and other places. They essentially created the opportunity for our client to develop a unique product that would create an emotional experience through scent, while still, of course, delivering on a key important rational benefit, that being long-lasting protection. So that insight drove the development of a new sub-brand for Secret deodorant line called Destinations, which promises scents that evoke locales and seasons. Based on the results of another methodology we employed, prediction markets, and on confidence, on deep confidence in this consumer insight, the Secret team actually skipped quantitative qualification testing and went straight to market. The good news was that not only did destinations advance from insight to concept development to market launch, all in record time, but it exceeded its sales forecast. So just as emotional triggers contribute to the success of a self-ethnography project, so do very simple but highly structured assignments. So what you're seeing here are examples of images taken by community members as they were shopping, using, in this case, this is a very simple mobile survey tool. In this case, we just asked them to show us what was attracting their attention in store and why, along with what, if any, impulse purchases they made and why. Not only did we get some great pictures, but we got some great insights that we simply wouldn't have gotten had we relied strictly on recall. We've also used this approach for more targeted work. So for example, when a client saw a drop in sales of a specific product after introducing a new type of jar for it, we asked community members to go to the relevant aisle the next time they were shopping and show us what they were seeing. So sure enough, this new package was definitely a culprit. It sort of led people to think that a jar of pasta sauce was actually a jar of salsa. But serendipitously, along the way, our client also learned that the product simply wasn't on the shelf in some retailers. So this essentially alerted them to a distribution problem they might otherwise not have been aware of. Here's another example. This is one of how consumers can use these mobile ethnography apps in support of in-home usage testing, in support of actually seeing what the customer experience is post-purchase as they try to use the product. So in this case, over the holiday season, Hallmark asked members of their private community to each buy a different Hallmark holiday product and test it out at home with their kids. So they just asked moms to provide a picture and answer a few simple questions each time their child played with the product. So the assignment was clear, the duration was short but intense, but the results were profound. They really informed everything from product design to packaging issues to messaging, to sort of understanding the discrepancy between messaging and actual customer experience, all of which informed the next year's lines of products. So by deputizing customers to essentially become field agents, we don't just learn what's breaking through the visual noise of the aisles or learn how kids are interacting with products at home. Beyond that, we're really giving participants the chance first to observe and then to reflect on what they're seeing. So we get their own insights regarding how they've deviated from their plans or routines, or why they made the impulse purchase they made, or how their kids are using the products, or how things are conforming to or violating their expectations. And again, you just can't get this kind of depth and texture by relying on recall, or even on a professional ethnographer shopping along. So here's another challenge. Without a professional ethnographer being there in person alongside the consumer, how can we be sure that we're not missing important steps in their process or moments in their customer experience or information about their experience? Well, one way is to use real-time streaming or shop-along tools. So in this example, you're looking at text and images taken from a virtual shop-along we did using a simple texting, text and image texting tool for a client who wanted to better understand the bra shopping experience. Bras seem to be coming up a lot today. Kimberly was in the store. She was a member of our community, so she was in the store. We were in our office 1,000 miles away, but in real time, we were seeing the same chaotic bra tree that she was seeing and overhearing the same conversation among disgruntled employees that she was hearing. But beyond the sights and sounds, ethnography apps also generate GPS location data, which some companies have used to discover some surprising insights. So, for example, a major toy manufacturer was developing an app to provide parenting tips. So they asked women to share their moments of success as parents, so, children's problem solved, crisis averted, as well as to share the moments in which they were really desperate for suggestions and help. What was interesting is that contrary to their hypothesis going into this project, the ethnographic work revealed that parents' moments of need arose not outside the home, not like when the kid was having a temper tantrum in the grocery store, but actually inside the home, when parents were trying to come up with a new hairstyle for their fashion-conscious daughter, or to cook a meal that their picky child would actually eat. So While this example illustrates how this kind of data can inform product development, mobile ethnography and consumer-generated ethnography can also have a huge impact on understanding and improving the customer experience. For instance, a hospitality client had their community members shoot a short video when they first entered their hotel room. Their goal was to understand what people tended to inspect first, what their unpacking rituals were, and how they turned a generic room into a homier environment. But along the way, they got images of stained wallpaper, leaky sinks, very material problems with specific properties that, thanks to the GPS data, they could act on almost immediately. Okay, so I've talked about latitude and longitude. Let me now touch on the benefits of being able to do longitudinal work with consumers. In fact, work far more long-term than a traditional ethnographic approach would enable. Over the course of 3 months during last year's health insurance open enrollment period, California health insurer HealthNet enlisted 40 of their online community members to document their insurance renewal journey. While technically more of a diary than an ethnography exercise, this project really illustrates the benefits of having long-term relationships with consumers who are equipped with ethnography apps and are willing to share some aspect of their lives in an ongoing way. So take a look at this timeline, which is in no way unusual. We collected dozens like it. And you can see how the customer experience can change dramatically over time and how clearly it suggests opportunities for improvement. This approach lets the company hear and really directly witness their members' emotional as well as operational experience. And what they learned was sobering. They found that their members didn't so much actively renew as just stay with them, and largely because of price. These were apathetic renewals, not actively positive ones, which meant that they're at-risk renewals. So HealthNet acted quickly and systematically on this insight. They shared out the findings from this in an immersive internal cross-functional action set workshop where they mapped out changes in advance of the 2015 open enrollment period that's about to begin. They realized that they weren't giving their members enough information early enough in the renewal process. So now they're coordinating much more closely with the California government. They're completely revising their member communications, and they are providing more online tools to give guidance and support to help people understand just where they are in this process. So HealthNet hopes that on the strength of the insight gathered through this longitudinal research, they'll retain and expand the company member base despite an increasingly competitive pricing environment. A man I've never met, actually, is a guy named Emmanuel Mantuco, commented on an article I wrote about this HealthNet example. And he made a great point about the unique value of consumer-driven longitudinal ethnographic research. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Energy has a peak and valley. Desire is a form of energy. If we assume that each peak of the eating desire is a visit to a fast food outlet, when will the next peak occur? How many times will it occur in, say, a month? How do we position ourselves to be there, to be the correct choice when that peak happens? Marketing psychology, it seems, is about the management of the energy of desires." That's what Emmanuel said. By the same token, I think that customer experience management is also about the cumulative or transformative effect of multiple encounters. Google refers to this as micro moments, and that's what you see on these slides. All of the transient moments of need where brands really have the opportunity to be there for people, especially on their mobile devices. So the beauty of longitudinal ethnographic work is that it really helps you identify those moments. So here's the final challenge to self-ethnography, and I think it's a really legitimate concern, which is, can you trust the information that you're getting when people are documenting their own lives versus when they're being observed by a professional ethnographer? Well, I think actually in many ways when people are documenting their own lives, what you get is more real than more traditional ways of doing research. So here's an example from Harvard. When they ask moms in a survey form what's on the Easter basket or what's in the Christmas stocking, she tends to talk about educational things like books for Easter or toothbrushes for Christmas, which are there. And then she might mention that she includes a bit of candy. But when she's doing a mobile ethnography with photos or videos, we get to see what a bit of candy looks like, right? And it's enormous. So the professional ethnographer might have captured the contents of the Easter basket, but she probably would have missed the mom's characterization of it as a bit of candy, and that's important. That being said, the other beauty of mobile ethnography tools is that they let consumers enlist the eyes of others. There's a guy named Siamak Solari from an ethnography company called Ethos in the UK, and he pioneered a technique which we have happily emulated. We've had community members photograph, say, their meals or the contents of their refrigerators, then pass the phone to others in their household to comment on just how typical all that healthy food really is or isn't. But even without the correcting eyes of others, again, there's just great power in the personal reflection enabled by the ethnographies that are the result of trusting relationships between consumers and researchers. So I know from experience that when people keep visual diaries of what's in their shopping carts and refrigerators and on their plates, they'll say, you know, gee, I thought I was a healthy eater, but now that I see what I'm consuming, I'm not so sure. We've had women take us into the changing room as they try on new pants, into their drawers and wardrobes as they show us their favorite bras. There they are again. We've even had teens photograph their used sanitary pads to explain what's problematic about them. And we've been able to do that work because we've developed long-term, trusting relationships with consumers. And yeah, that kind of hard-won intimacy can and should be trusted. In a community, we're able to trust what we're seeing more because we're getting an all-rounded picture of who our consumers are over time. It's much easier to lie when you're just responding to a panel survey. So relationships foster disclosure of really personal things. And those intimate thoughts and moments are what make an emotional impact on organizations, going back to Vicki. That's what excites the empathy of colleagues, of your colleagues, and ultimately are what drive change. So just as in live ethnography, researchers have to earn the trust of people from whom they're hoping to learn. So how do you do that? By building long-term or short-term but very high-touch relationships, whether you do that through private online communities or meetups or in-home ethnographies or other means. By revealing who you are so that people don't feel as though they're being asked to interact with a cipher. And that requires us as researchers to share a bit of ourselves, to actually model the kind of sharing and disclosure we're seeking from consumers. In fact, I'd argue that playback and dialogue really turn out to be key success factors. The diligent and often intimate disclosures by citizen ethnographers should never be transmitted to a black box. Otherwise, these once willing sort of subjects quickly feel unacknowledged. What's more, when consumers document their days for remote researchers, it's really crucial that we close the loop, testing our interpretations with them, saying, here's a pattern we've observed. Help us understand it. You know, that not only demonstrates the kind of reciprocity that's inherently motivating, but it really helps us understand if we're drawing valid conclusions. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's really easy to forget that we may not be our consumers, and that's what makes this kind of ethnographic work so crucial. At Hallmark, they really understand the importance of developing corporate empathy through ethnography and have used this method in a variety of ways. So in this example, they just asked community members to take a photo of every waking hour over the course of the day and comment on what was going on, what was typical, what was atypical. What you're seeing here is actually a typical morning hour from the life of a community member who gets up at the crack of dawn to go to her CrossFit class or on a power walk with a friend, and then celebrates her accomplishment by knocking back a box of donuts. Using virtual ethnography, Hallmark has also spent Mother's Day and Easter and Father's Day and even Christmas Eve with their consumers and their families. They do it because fundamentally they're in the emotions business. We're all fundamentally in the emotions business. It's critical for them, as it is for anyone concerned with customer experience, to help their own employees become more intimately familiar with the lives and needs of their consumers. So Ultimately, the outcome of consumer-conducted ethnography is not just to reveal unmet needs or breakdowns in customer experience or innovation opportunities. Ultimately, it's really about humanizing consumers for the brands that serve them, and that ultimately is the key to a holistic and satisfying customer experience. So with that, let me stop talking, and I would love to take your questions or comments or dissent.
Thank you, Julie. This has been incredible, and I couldn't help but think of the times that I've gone for my workout and then ate donuts myself. So we have a number of people on the webinar right now, and we'd love to take questions. If you have a question, just go ahead and type it into that question box that's there in your control panel, and we'll look to bring those questions to Julie. In the meantime, Julie, why don't I just ask you, how did you get started in this? And I mean, I know that you're very into storytelling. How did you find your way down this path?
Oh, great question. Completely accidentally. I mean, you know, my background was as a writer and as a psychologist, and then an instructional designer, and I'm actually one of the founders of C-Space. And at the point that we founded the company, we knew that relationships are ultimately what drive results. That we started the company thinking we were going to be kind of a place for just employees to share knowledge and needs and best practices and advice with one another. And then actually one of our clients said, gee, we like this community idea, but think it would be great to do it with our customers. And we were young and improvisational and a startup, and we said, sure. And that transformed our business. So we got into kind of this business of developing real relationships with customers through the inspiration of one of our own customers. And how we got into ethnography in particular was just once mobile phones started becoming ubiquitous and once it became apparent that smartphones were people's kind of most intimate companions, we realized there was just a huge opportunity to sort of literally walk in someone's pocket as they were going through their daily lives. So that's how we got into it. And again, I can't overestimate how what an honor it actually is to do this kind of work, to sort of see what people are willing to share when they feel that they're being heard and when they feel that what they're sharing might actually have an impact.
I can only imagine. I mean, you hear the story of NPR's StoryCorps and how much people are willing to open up when they know somebody is listening. And I wonder, are the people very engaged to find out what you've discovered about them? Do they want to hear the details? Do they want you to tell them to not eat donuts after they work out? Or how does that go?
Yeah, so we would never tell them not to eat donuts after they work out. And in fact, I think we tell each other we should eat donuts after we work out. No, right. I mean, so our goal is not to sort of counsel, but yeah, people are keenly. I mean, that's what keeps people engaged, is closing the loop with them. So to sort of say, gee, you know, here's what we're hearing from you. Some of you do X, some of you do Y, but all of you do Z, and we're trying to understand what that means. Here's the sense we're making of it. Are we getting it right, or what are we missing? It sort of takes what had been data and turns it into an ongoing dialogue with people. And so while this may violate some of the traditional rules of research, we actually think it deepens our understanding and sort of creates much richer insights than, you know, a simple closed-ended question would. So being able to sort of close the loop with people and say, here's what we're hearing, here's what we're understanding from it, help us understand it better. You know, people are quite engaged. It's like if you think about when you take a quick poll online, right, even something as simple as that, you want to know how your answer compared to others. People have this innate desire, I think, to get that sort of mirroring or feedback. So that's something that we intentionally use in design communities and ethnography.
That's so true. What a great point. what has surprised you the most about this work? What have you just completely took you off took you off guard?
Yeah, what people were willing to share. I mean, and I should say they share it just with. I mean, so as I mentioned, kids have photographed their used sanitary pads.
Right.
We've had
Right.
people go into the changing room and not show us getting into the jeans necessarily, but then showing us themselves trying on the, checking out the fit of a pair of jeans, which, speaking for myself, can be a really mortifying experience. So, I mean, what has surprised me is again, the intimacy of disclosure that people will offer when they feel that they know you, when they feel that they can trust you, and when they feel that you're actually going to do something with that knowledge. I think the other thing that doesn't somewhat surprise me, but always delights me, is the creativity people will exercise when given the chance. So, I mean, we also have people sort of make commercials, or even some people who were doing the, a moment of the day, the kind of like the hourly assignment we did for Hallmark. So we got all kinds of pictures and images and audio notes of, the hour by hour, blow by blow of people's lives. But people will then sort of say, hey, I've got all of this material, and they'll turn it into their own little video. So it's just surprising and delightful to see the time and the energy and the creativity that people will invest in creating their own narratives. That I think there's just something inherently satisfying about observing and then trying to make sense of your own life experience. And so we get to see both the raw observations, the raw data, the sights and the sounds, but also the sense that people make of it for themselves.
That has got to be so enriching. What a fantastic opportunity.
Oh yeah, I love my job.
I can only imagine. So we look like we have any questions at the moment, but I'm watching this question box. So if you do have a question for Julie, please feel free to type it in the box, and we will bring it to her. And I guess, Julie, maybe I would wrap up with a question, one more question from me, if you don't mind. I'd be very curious as to see how you're able to translate what you're doing and the information that you gather in these life stories. How have you been able to translate that over to a company so that they can put that really into their customer experience process and manage that story, that information
Right.
in the storytelling fashion?
Yeah, great question. So let me give you a few examples as answers. So with the HealthNet story, where people kept this long-term diary over the course of months, and it was fabulous because you could sort of see things start out swimmingly. They then discover they had a problem with the payment processor, the third party that they were using. So again, sort of almost in real time, they could suddenly see where the customer experience turned south, and they were able to act on that by getting a new payment provider. So I think how we brought it to life and helped integrate it into the organization was we built out these timelines kind of in aggregate in a more representative way, and actually did a day-long workshop where there was signage on the walls so that people could almost literally walk through people's enrollment experience from start to finish, from research through actually having coverage and then trying to figure out what to do next. So we certainly work very actively to try to tell the story in a compelling way, as well as to actually workshop it, to sort of make sure that it doesn't just be nothing more than a story. So other examples would be, well, the Vicky photo film. That documentary was shown in the context of a larger meeting of marketing and operations and CX people in our client organization. I think other ways, Hallmark routinely creates these customer immersion rooms where they'll actually sort of decorate a physical space with member-generated, consumer-generated content that shows them in their lives using Hallmark products. And they will have audio recordings, so you could actually pick up the phone and hear real consumers, sharing their experiences. So I think, how we use it to enhance customer experience, going back particularly to the HealthNet, but also to the retailer example, is a very vivid but also longitudinal work. We're able to, through storytelling, through films, through customer immersion, through posters, not just bring the consumer experience to life, but really isolate those micro moments, those transformative moments where a good experience turns into a bad one or vice versa.
Thanks, Julie. That's really helpful. All right, I'm going to do one last call out for any questions. And I am going to assume that we have none, but it looks like we have your contact information, Julie. So if you are watching this or if you're watching the recording and you have additional questions on consumer ethnography, please feel free to reach out to Julie or to the team at C-Space. And Julie, I really want to thank you for sharing your story and how you were able to bring these, to bring individuals and people to life and kind of examine that a little deeper. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you so much for that today.
Oh, thank you. It was really my pleasure, Leslie. Good luck with the rest of the day.
Oh, thank you. I want to wish everyone a happy CX Day, and we'll continue with our online and in-person events throughout the day. So no matter where you are in the world, we're celebrating a Global Customer Experience Day, and I look forward to celebrating along with all of you. You can find us on Twitter at CXPA_assoc. Or you can find us at #CXDay. Again, thank you, Julie, and the team at C-Space, and I look forward to catching up with you again in the future.
Great. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.